In 1978, a divorce court judge made what seemed like a reasonable ruling. Marvin Gaye would pay his ex-wife Anna Gordy $1.5 million from his next album's profits as alimony settlement. The judge thought he was being fair, maybe even generous to Anna. What he didn't realize was that he had just handed Marvin the most devastating weapon in music history. Instead of writing love songs or dance tracks, Marvin created Hear My Dear, a double album that was essentially a musical assassination of his ex-wife, broadcast to the entire world. Anna got her money, but the psychological cost was something no court could calculate. If you want to discover how this musical revenge unfolded and changed everything, keep watching. Because what happened next wasn't just a divorce settlement, it was the creation of the most vindictive masterpiece in recording history. Marvin began work on what would become Hear My Dear in early 1978, and from the beginning it was clear that this would be unlike anything he had ever recorded. Instead of working with his usual collaborators at Motown, he assembled a small team of musicians and engineers who understood that they were creating something unprecedented, a bell-length musical assault on one specific person. The recording sessions took place at Marvin's home studio in Hidden Hills, California, a location that provided both privacy and psychological comfort for what was essentially an extended therapy session set to music. Marvin had installed state-of-the-art recording equipment in his house, allowing him to work at all hours without outside interference or time constraints. This freedom proved crucial because Hear My Dear required a level of emotional honesty and vindictive creativity that could only be achieved in complete isolation. From the opening track, it was clear that Marvin intended to use every tool at his disposal to inflict maximum psychological damage on Anna. The album begins with spoken-word passages where Marvin directly addresses his ex-wife, his voice dripping with sarcasm and barely contained rage. He thanks the judge for making the album possible, thanks Anna for the inspiration, and then begins a 76-minute musical autopsy of their relationship. But this wasn't just an angry man venting his frustrations. It was a carefully crafted psychological attack designed by someone who knew his target intimately. Marvin had spent 15 years learning Anna's insecurities, her fears, her most private thoughts, and her deepest vulnerabilities. Every song on Hear My Dear was weaponized with this knowledge, designed to cause not just embarrassment, but genuine psychological trauma. The track Anna's Song contains detailed references to Anna's age, her appearance, and her alleged inadequacies as a wife. When did you stop loving me? When Did I Stop Loving You? Includes musical references to arguments they had during their marriage, complete with melodic quotes from songs they had shared as a couple. Most devastatingly, several tracks contain sexual content that revealed intimate details about their physical relationship, information that no person should have to hear made public. The case eventually came before Judge Ronald M. George in Los Angeles Superior Court, a jurist who had a reputation for creative solutions to complex financial disputes. When he reviewed the Gaye divorce case, he faced a seemingly impossible problem. Marvin Gaye owed his wife over $1 million in back alimony and property settlements, but claimed he was financially unable to pay such a sum in cash. Marvin's financial situation in 1977 was genuinely complicated. Although he had earned millions during his career, he had also spent extravagantly, invested poorly, and accumulated significant debts to the Internal Revenue Service. His lawyers argued that forcing him to pay a large lump sum would bankrupt him and ultimately leave Anna with nothing. They proposed an alternative. Marvin would record his next album and give all the profits to Anna as alimony settlement. Judge George found this proposal intriguing. From a legal standpoint, it seemed to solve multiple problems. Anna would eventually receive her money. Marvin would have an incentive to create commercially successful music, and the court wouldn't have to deal with complicated asset seizures or bankruptcy proceedings. The judge also seemed to believe that the creative process might help Marvin work through his anger in a constructive way. What Judge George didn't understand was that he was essentially paying Marvin Gaye to create the most elaborate form of revenge in entertainment history. The ruling meant that every dollar Anna received would come directly from an album that Marvin could fill with whatever content he chose. There were no restrictions on lyrical content, no requirements for commercial viability, and no protection for Anna's privacy or dignity. The court had unwittingly created a situation where Marvin's financial obligations and his desire for revenge could be satisfied simultaneously. Anna's lawyers raised concerns about the unusual arrangement, but Judge George was convinced that his solution was both fair and creative. The final order, signed in December 1977, required Marvin to complete and release a new album by the end of 1978, with all net profits to be paid directly to Anna as satisfaction of his alimony obligations. By 1973, The Gaye-Gordy marriage was disintegrating in spectacular fashion. Marvin had begun an affair with Janice Hunter, a 17-year-old who worked at Motown, while Anna struggled to maintain both her marriage and her dignity. The age difference between Marvin and Janice became a public scandal that embarrassed the entire Gordy family, but it was just the beginning of what would become an all-out war. Anna's response to Marvin's infidelity revealed the steel beneath her sophisticated exterior. She hired private investigators to document Marvin's affair, gathered financial records to protect her interests, and began building a legal case that would ensure she received everything she was entitled to under California's community property laws. What Anna didn't anticipate was how vindictive Marvin could become when he felt cornered. Marvin's retaliation was swift and cruel. He began flaunting his relationship with Janice, bringing her to Motown events where Anna would be forced to see them together. He made statements to the press suggesting that Anna had never truly understood him as an artist, and he began working on songs that contained barely veiled references to their marital problems. The private became public in ways that devastated Anna, who had spent her entire career maintaining the polished, professional image that Motown demanded. The situation reached a crisis point when Anna filed for divorce in 1975. The legal proceedings revealed the full extent of their financial entanglements. Not only were they married, but Anna had been instrumental in managing Marvin's career and had legitimate claims to a significant portion of his future earnings. Marvin's response was to become increasingly erratic, missing court dates, failing to comply with temporary support orders, and making threats about what he would do if Anna tried to take everything he had worked for. But Anna wasn't just fighting for money. She was fighting for recognition of her contributions to Marvin's career. The legal briefs filed in their divorce case reveal a woman who had sacrificed her own ambitions to build her husband's success, only to be publicly humiliated when he decided she was no longer useful to him. The betrayal was personal, professional, and profoundly public. Before we understand the revenge, we need to understand what was being destroyed. Anna Ruby Gordy wasn't just another woman in Marvin's life. She was royalty in the world of black music. Born in 1922, Anna was the older sister of Berry Gordy Jr., the man who would build Motown Records into the most successful black-owned business in America. When Anna married Marvin Gaye in 1963, she wasn't just gaining a husband, she was crowning a king within the Motown dynasty. Anna had been instrumental in building Motown from its earliest days. While Berry focused on the business and creative sides, Anna managed the personal relationships, the family dynamics, and the delicate politics that kept dozens of temperamental artists working together. She was the person who could calm Diana Ross when she threw tantrums, the one who could talk sense into Stevie Wonder when he wanted to break his contracts, and most importantly, she was the woman who could handle Marvin Gaye when his artistic temperament threatened to derail his career. The marriage between Anna and Marvin was more than romantic. It was strategic. Anna was 17 years older than Marvin, a sophisticated woman who understood the music business in ways that the young singer from Washington, D.C. could barely comprehend. She became his manager, his mentor, and his connection to the power structure that could make or break careers. Under Anna's guidance, Marvin transformed from a struggling R&B singer into one of Motown's biggest stars, with hits like How Sweet It Is and I Heard It Through the Grapevine, establishing him as a major force in popular music. But success bred complications. As Marvin's fame grew, so did his ego, his artistic ambitions, and his resentment toward the control structures that Anna represented. By the early 1970s, their marriage had become a battlefield where personal grievances mixed with professional tensions. Marvin began to see Anna not as his partner but as his captor, the person who kept him tied to Motown's artistic limitations and business practices he increasingly despised. The breaking point came with Marvin's album What's Going On in 1971. Anna and Berry initially opposed the project, viewing its social and political content as commercially risky. When the album became both a critical and commercial success, Marvin felt vindicated but also deeply resentful. In his mind, the people closest to him had tried to prevent his greatest artistic achievement. This resentment would poison their relationship for years to come. What made Hear My Dear particularly cruel was not just its content, but its sophisticated musical arrangements. Marvin didn't just create an angry rant set to music. He crafted beautiful, complex compositions that forced listeners to appreciate the artistry, even as they were witnessing emotional destruction. The album features some of Marvin's most innovative vocal performances, his most complex harmonies, and his most sophisticated production techniques. The beauty of the music made the cruelty of the lyrics even more effective. Music industry professionals who heard advance copies of Hear My Dear were genuinely shocked by what Marvin had created. This wasn't just a breakup album. It was musical terrorism directed at one specific person. Producer Hal Davis, who had worked with Marvin on previous projects, later described listening to the album as watching someone commit murder with a symphony orchestra. The album's most devastating track, You Can Leave But It's Going to Cost You, contains what amounts to a musical itemization of everything Marvin felt Anna owed him for the years of marriage. The song lists her supposed failures as a wife, her alleged attempts to control his career, and his resentment over her family connections. But the real cruelty lies in the song's structure. It's built around a beautiful melody that makes the hateful lyrics almost hypnotic. Even more calculated was Marvin's decision to include musical references to songs that had been meaningful during their relationship. Falling in Love Again contains melodic and harmonic elements borrowed from You're All I Need to Get By, a song that Marvin had often dedicated to Anna during their happier years. The musical callback forced Anna to hear their romantic history being systematically destroyed, note by note. When Here My Dear was released in December 1978, it immediately sparked controversy that extended far beyond the music industry. Critics were forced to grapple with questions about the relationship between artistic expression and personal responsibility. Was Marvin's album a legitimate work of art, or was it simply a sophisticated form of emotional abuse set to music? The album's musical sophistication made these questions even more complex. Here My Dear contains some of Marvin's most innovative work, with complex arrangements, sophisticated production techniques, and vocal performances that demonstrated his artistic growth. Several tracks, including Falling in Love Again and Somebody Told You, became radio favorites despite their controversial content. The contradiction between the album's artistic merit and its cruel intentions forced music lovers to confront uncomfortable questions about the relationship between art and morality. Rolling Stone magazine's review of Here My Dear captured the critical community's ambivalence. This is either the most honest album ever made, or the most vindictive, and possibly both. The review praised Marvin's musical innovation while condemning his personal vindictiveness, a position that became typical of critical responses to the album. The album's commercial performance was equally complicated. While it didn't achieve the massive sales of Marvin's previous releases, Here My Dear sold well enough to generate significant profits for Anna. The album peaked at number 26 on the Billboard Albums chart and remained on the charts for several months. More importantly for Marvin's revenge, it achieved extensive radio play, ensuring that Anna's humiliation reached the widest possible audience. But Here My Dear also established a template for musical revenge that would influence artists for decades to come. The idea that a breakup could become the subject of an entire album, complete with intimate details and personal attacks, became increasingly common in popular music. From Taylor Swift's detailed accounts of failed relationships to Eminem's brutal attacks on his ex-wife, the precedent set by Here My Dear can be seen throughout modern popular music. Throughout the creation and release of Here My Dear, Anna Gordy maintained a public silence that spoke volumes about both her dignity and her devastation. Friends and family members who were close to Anna during this period describe a woman who was struggling to maintain her composure while being systematically destroyed by someone she had once loved and supported. The psychological impact of Here My Dear on Anna was immediate and severe. Having intimate details of her marriage broadcast to the world was traumatic enough. But the album's commercial success meant that her humiliation was being purchased and enjoyed by millions of people. Every time someone bought the album or heard it on the radio, Anna's most private moments were being consumed as entertainment. Anna's response to the album revealed both her strength and her vulnerability. Publicly, she maintained her composure, making only brief statements to the press about her disappointment in Marvin's decision to use their personal relationship as material for his art. Privately, according to family members and close friends, she was devastated by the betrayal and struggled to understand how someone she had supported and loved for 15 years could be so deliberately cruel. The financial irony of the situation was not lost on Anna or her supporters. Every copy of Here My Dear that sold put money directly into her bank account, meaning that her humiliation was literally profitable. The more successful the album became, the more money she would receive, but also the more people would hear the intimate details of her failed marriage. It was a sadistic twist that Marvin had almost certainly calculated when he was creating the album. Anna's friends in the music industry rallied around her, with several prominent artists and executives expressing their disgust at Marvin's behavior. Diana Ross, who had known Anna since the earliest days of Motown, was reportedly furious at Marvin and refused to work with him on future projects. Stevie Wonder, another longtime Motown artist, made public statements about the importance of treating former partners with respect, comments that were widely interpreted as criticisms of Marvin's actions. While Marvin was creating his musical revenge, Gordy found himself in an impossible situation. As the head of Motown Records, he was contractually obligated to release and promote whatever album Marvin delivered. As Anna's brother, he was witnessing his sister being publicly destroyed by an artist his company had made famous. The conflict between business and family created tensions that would reshape Motown's relationships with all of its artists. Barry's first response was to try to convince Marvin to reconsider the album's content. He arranged several meetings where he, Anna, and other family members attempted to reason with Marvin, explaining how the album would hurt not just Anna but the entire extended family that had supported his career. These conversations were reportedly explosive, with Marvin accusing the Gordy family of trying to suppress his artistic expression, and Barry countering that artistic freedom didn't give anyone the right to publicly humiliate family members. When it became clear that Marvin wouldn't change the album's content, Barry faced a choice that would define his legacy as both a businessman and a family member. He could refuse to release the album, which would violate Marvin's contract and potentially result in expensive lawsuits, or he could release it and watch his sister be destroyed for the entertainment of millions of people. Barry ultimately chose business over family, but not without conditions. He insisted that Motown would provide only minimal promotion for Hear My Dear, hoping that limited marketing would reduce the album's audience and minimize Anna's public humiliation. He also arranged for Anna to receive psychological counseling and legal advice about her options for responding to the album's release. The decision to release Hear My Dear marked the beginning of the end of the Gordy family's unified control over Motown. Trust had been broken not just between Barry and Anna, but between Barry and other family members who felt he had chosen money over loyalty. The album's release would eventually contribute to Barry's decision to sell Motown to MCA Records, ending the family business that had dominated black music for nearly 3 decades. The release of Hear My Dear raised unprecedented legal and ethical questions about the rights of public figures to privacy, even after divorce. Anna's lawyers explored several possible legal responses, including lawsuits for invasion of privacy, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and defamation. However, the unique circumstances of the album's creation, specifically the court order that required Marvin to create it, made legal remedies extremely difficult. The fact that Anna was legally required to accept profits from an album that humiliated her created a situation that no court had previously encountered. Legal scholars who analyzed the case noted that Judge George's creative solution had inadvertently created a form of legally sanctioned revenge that had no precedent in American law. The situation highlighted the need for courts to consider not just financial outcomes but psychological impacts when crafting divorce settlements. Anna ultimately decided against pursuing legal action, partly because of the uncertain legal landscape and partly because any lawsuit would only generate more publicity for the album and extend her humiliation. Her decision to maintain her dignity rather than fight back publicly was seen by many as the most powerful response she could make to Marvin's attacks. The ethical implications of Hear My Dear extended beyond the immediate participants to include everyone involved in the album's creation and promotion. Musicians, engineers, producers, and record executives all had to decide whether their professional obligations required them to participate in what was essentially a form of emotional warfare. Some chose to work on the album despite their reservations. Others refused to be involved. Motown's decision to release and distribute the album also raised questions about corporate responsibility. While the company was contractually obligated to release the album, critics argued that Motown could have found ways to minimize the damage to Anna while still fulfilling its legal obligations. The company's prioritization of business considerations over family loyalty would have long-lasting consequences for its relationships with other artists and family members. In the end, Hear My Dear stands as perhaps the most expensive act of musical revenge in history, expensive not just in terms of the $1.5 million it generated for Anna, but in terms of the human relationships it destroyed and the moral boundaries it crossed. Marvin Gaye succeeded in creating exactly what he intended, a musical weapon designed to cause maximum psychological damage to someone he once loved. The album's existence serves as a reminder that artistic talent and technical skill can be used for destructive purposes just as easily as constructive ones. Marvin's genius as a musician made his revenge more effective, but it also made his actions more morally reprehensible. The sophistication of Hear My Dear makes it clear that this was not an impulsive act of anger, but a calculated campaign of psychological warfare. Anna Gordy received her money, as the court had ordered, but she also received a lifetime of public humiliation, a permanent reminder that someone she had loved and supported was capable of extraordinary cruelty. The judge who crafted the creative solution that made Hear My Dear possible could never have imagined that his attempt at fairness would result in one of the most vindictive acts in entertainment history. Today, Hear My Dear remains available on streaming services, in record stores, and in the permanent collection of American popular music. Every time someone discovers the album, Anna's humiliation is renewed, and Marvin's revenge continues to achieve its intended effect. It is a testament to the power of music to preserve both beauty and ugliness forever, and a warning about the responsibility that comes with artistic talent. The most tragic irony of Hear My Dear is that it represents both the peak of Marvin Gaye's artistic sophistication and the nadir of his moral character. The same creative genius that gave the world What's Going On and Let's Get It On also created one of the cruelest acts of public humiliation in modern history. In trying to hurt Anna, Marvin ultimately diminished himself, transforming from an artist who used his platform to heal and unite people into someone who weaponized his talent for personal revenge. Gordy got her money, Marvin Gaye got his revenge. But the cost of both was measured in destroyed relationships, damaged reputations, and moral compromises that could never be undone. Hear My Dear remains a masterpiece of musical revenge and a permanent reminder that artistic genius without moral wisdom can create beauty that causes nothing but pain. More than 4 decades after its release, Hear My Dear remains one of the most controversial albums in popular music history. Its influence can be seen in countless breakup songs, revenge albums, and musical tell-alls that have followed. The album established that personal relationships were fair game for artistic exploration, regardless of the human cost to the people involved. Modern artists who create music about their failed relationships often cite Hear My Dear as both an inspiration and a cautionary tale. The album demonstrated the power of music to inflict emotional damage, but it also showed the potential consequences of using that power without consideration for others. Many contemporary musicians have tried to find ways to process their relationship experiences through music without crossing the lines of decency that Marvin obliterated. The album's musical innovations have also continued to influence artists across multiple genres. Marvin's sophisticated production techniques, complex vocal arrangements, and willingness to experiment with unconventional song structures can be heard in the work of artists ranging from D'Angelo to Frank Ocean. The tragedy is that these innovations were developed in service of such destructive purposes. Music critics and historians continue to debate whether Hear My Dear should be celebrated as an artistic achievement or condemned as an act of emotional cruelty. The album's inclusion in various greatest albums lists always comes with extensive caveats about its problematic content and creation circumstances. This ongoing debate reflects the broader questions about art, morality, and personal responsibility that the album raised. The true cost of Hear My Dear cannot be measured in dollars or record sales, but in the human damage it inflicted on everyone involved. Gordy never fully recovered from the public humiliation, and her relationships with both Marvin and Barry were permanently damaged. The album's existence meant that her most private moments would remain public entertainment forever, a burden that she carried for the rest of her life. Marvin's victory was ultimately Pyrrhic. While he had succeeded in humiliating Anna and satisfying his financial obligations, he had also destroyed his relationship with the Motown family that had made his career possible. Gordy never forgave Marvin for the pain he had caused Anna, and other Motown artists began to distance themselves from someone who had used his platform so vindictively. The album also damaged Marvin's relationship with his own children, who eventually had to confront the fact that their father had publicly humiliated their stepmother for profit. The psychological impact on Marvin Gaye III and Nona Gaye, who were teenagers when Hear My Dear was released, was significant and lasting. They found themselves in the impossible position of loving a father who had done something genuinely cruel to someone they also cared about. Perhaps most tragically, Hear My Dear represented a missed opportunity for healing and growth. Instead of using his artistic talents to process his pain and move forward, Marvin had chosen to weaponize his creativity for revenge. The time and energy he spent creating the album could have been used to build new relationships, develop his artistry in positive directions, or work through his emotional issues in healthier ways.